Okay, welcome to Black News Future Part 2. I'm your host, Bruce Poinsett, and this is a series where we explore Black media infrastructure in Portland, Oregon, and both the present as well as the future, and what's working, what support is needed to build it, because I believe a robust, independent Black media infrastructure is important, one, to the information health of the community and of the city, because there's a lot of stories that get lost when you don't have Black reporting, Black editors, Black media makers, but then also to the opportunities when it comes to career and professional development that comes from Black-led efforts in, be it Black media or throughout this ecosystem. I'm a product of it. So the first edition we did was on print media. We had Donovan Smith, Max Smith, and Jenny Moore, and that video is now available online. So I hope you check that out. And the second one we're dedicating to the realm of audio. So specifically radio and podcasting. And I have actually before I announce my special guest I have with me, let me first thank the Agora Journalism Center and Andrew Devigal specifically for helping support this program and providing us the platform to have these necessary conversations. And with that, now let me introduce our guest for this evening. It's a special discussion centered around the Numberz FM, which, as by their website, the Numberz FM radio station provides a very unique listener and creator experience by carving out media space to empower communities of color to share their thoughts, concerns, and celebrate each other. The intent of their current musical format is to give a full representation of the Black music experience, not just hip hop and R&B. Along with those genres, they play reggae, house, Afrobeat, jazz, funk, and gospel. The primary purpose of the Numberz is to create media space for Black people and communities of color in a city where gentrification has played a significant role in scattering their voices. And today we have a couple representatives from the Numberz, as well as the host of a number of programs, including, I would say, my favorite podcast in Portland, The Unrefined Sophisticates. So first off, we have Morgan Jones, who is a multi-hyphenate creative, including podcaster, accessories maker, and political analyst from Portland, Oregon. Morgan is found meeting and learning and sharing information with others in an effort to collectively dismantle systems of oppression for all people. And then we have Can Jones, no relation, who is a man trying to turn small talk into medium talk in an attempt to understand the larger picture. He is a multimedia maven, content developer, and sometimes he says things that people think are cool. So with that, I'd like to welcome Morgan Jones and Can Jones onto the screen now. How are you both doing today?
Woo. Good. I'm doing great. Thank you. Happy to be here.
I need that intro soundbite too.
Yeah, we're just gonna clip this.
So for those who don't know, we're gonna have another guest on here, DJ Ambush, who is the executive director of the Numberz, but he's been under the weather, so we wish him a speedy recovery. And trust me, that conversation is soon to happen. For those who don't know, Ambush is a big comic head, so I brought my Vision shirt especially for him today. So when he sees this, I want him to, feel kind of way. Anyways, but with that, I do want to move to why we came here today, which is to talk about, one, the Numberz, but two, Black radio and the audio space and what the possibilities are, because, we're in a space where a lot of people thought maybe podcasting might be like a trend, and now we're saying, okay, no, this is looking like the future of these things. But what does that opportunity mean for Black stories in Portland in particular? So with that, I'm happy to have you two here. And before we get into the Unrefined Sophisticates and kind of your stories with the Numberz specifically, I just want you to talk about, one, like, did you have, because Morgan, you're from Portland, Ken, you're a transplant, but you could just talk about what, I guess, the Black radio station, Black media presence kind of looked like in your respective areas where you grew up.
You want to start with that, Morg, since it's
Yeah.
a Portland centric
Yeah,
question.
I'll-
I'll just sit here and sip my water.
You enjoy that water. Yes, I am from here, born and raised. I have had the luck to live other places as well, and I consistently find myself back in Portland. Radio is very different here than it is in other cities, and when I was growing up, we had 1480 KBMS. That was AM radio, and that was the only Black station. KBOO is community radio, and they always had some, programming, but that's a community-led station, and that means a lot of different things. So there was some programming, but you wouldn't call it Black radio. So Portland hasn't really had Black radio in my adult years outside of the Numbers, which is very new. And we've had, like urban leaning stations, I guess, but that's not Black radio. And when it's, what's the big, like iHeartRadio owns all of the stations anyway, or, everything sounds like Z100. So there's going to be Black music, but it's not Black centered. They're not talking about Black stories. And I really appreciated that from 1480. What is really cool about the Numbers is they're integrating all of it. It's music, it's talk content, and understanding how important talk content is now. Like you said, it definitely felt like podcasting could just be a fad and everybody was able to just get equipment real quick and talk into a mic. But the stories are important, and there's a lot of different ways that you can produce a show, and there's a lot of different ways that you can tell a story. So talk content is kind of the future. I mean, like when we think about how you consume things now, I used to read a lot of books, and now I listen to a lot of books, and that frees up some, maybe I'm doing laundry or something, but I still get to be a part and be immersed in a story, even without sitting and reading. So the Black experience in Portland on radio is small, but the Numbers is making a big impact, and in a time where it's incredibly important to be hearing these stories from Black people who live here, because that myth still exists, that there's no Black people in Portland. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Oregon as a whole.
Or Oregon as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah. And I say for myself, growing up in Southern California, San Diego primarily, there was just urban leaning stations that I recall growing up, not a dedicated Black show or station. It was just your hip hop and R&B, jamming Z90. That was that was what I grew up with.
They're jamming everywhere.
Yeah, big Z's. But then, of course, kind of as Morg mentioned, seeing the Numbers do it the way that it's being done, where it's centered on Blackness. And that's also showing the diaspora in terms of it's not just this monolith and this one way of being Black. That's why, as you were, kind of going through the description of the station with a lot of the music programming, starting out with playlists from people in the community. Everybody in the community that doesn't listen to the same music. So that's kind of what set it apart in terms of getting music that ranged from rock, classical to your rap, underground, local, whatever it may be, all of that stuff blended together to give more of a full experience into, the music that we love.
Right. And can you just talk a little bit about you all do play actually a few different roles at the station. You just, I guess, list out, different shows you all are doing, different roles you both play.
Dun-dun-dun. So I am the talk content coordinator for the Numbers. So I am in charge of kind of building out our talk programming, getting the podcast network set up along with stuff that runs on air. That's one of the hats. I also tag team run up the numbers every Sunday or Monday with Ambush, which we cover local and national stories, again, from our lens, kind of in a weekend update for people familiar with Saturday Night Live, kind of in that style. Then there's me and Morgan. We collaborate for the Unrefined Sophisticates podcast. And that's a weekly thing that we do. And then I also talks with June, which is talking with a therapist about things that impact, so kind of more, the conversation is centered around what's going on and what she's seeing in her field as far as the conversations that are coming up, based on the different, as we go through these seasons. And it's like a monthly conversation. Just kind of centered around the Black experiences. I think that, I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones that I'm at the top of my mind. I'm sure I do more somewhere.
I don't officially work for the Numberz. I unofficially do a lot of support, but doing Unrefined Sophisticates, being on the Numberz, our first hour plays on the Numberz, and I know that gives us an exposure to exactly who we want to be listening to our show anyway, like we're lucky to be on the station is the way that I think about it.
Yes.
Yeah, don't you also have a show with Ambush, if I'm correct?
Oh, I do, but that's not on the Numberz. Ambush and I do the news every Thursday at X-Ray, another community-led radio station and sister station to the Numberz. We do news with my fiance every Thursday at 7:30 in the morning.
Y'all are fiancés?
We are fiancés.
Fianced?
We are fianced. We're betrothed to each other. I think that's the words we use today. The kids, that is. For everybody paying attention, Ambush, sounds like a lot of nepotism now, but Ambush is my fiance, and we do that news show. I also do a few other shows, and one of them will be on the Numberz, called Work Wives, and that is myself and one of my girlfriends who lives in Oakland. Totally lost what the actual question was with the fact that you exposed me for being engaged to Ambush. So.
Breaking news, everyone.
Breaking news.
To that point, though, I'm kind of curious, just like as creators of a number of different things, just, we talk about making the content, producing the content, but as far as like how you all consume, like, what does your podcast radio consumption look like? What are the shows that, or types of shows that kind of draw you in as a listener?
Oof. I just pulled up my iTunes right now just to look at the top list of my library. I got a social media, marketing talk show, Stuff You Should Know podcast, Something You Should Know, The Daily Zeitgeist, Hidden Brain, TED Radio Hour, Daddy Issue. Yeah, it's a interesting range. How did this get made? Code Switch, The Read, Us, Klima, Stories with Bima. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff on here. It's a mix. But that's these are like daily. Like I'm listening to podcasts routinely, regularly.
Yeah, I am Can got me onto the Daily Zeitgeist. I've listened to Code Switch, but most of the things that I listen to are true crime things. And
no judgment here.
No, okay, thank you. Thank you.
There is over here, though.
But definitely, I'm sure. I mean, how will I be prepared? How else will I be prepared for the person in the forest? Like, I don't go hiking, but if I did, I'm gonna be ready for it. I listen to a lot of true crime stuff. I think it helps shape my worldview. And I listen to a lot of legal things because I don't understand how the system ever was supposed to work. So I try and learn more about it daily. And I listen to other things that are messy. So, Give me a Drink Champs. Give me, I used to listen to Joe Budden a little bit. I don't much anymore, but I like some messiness. I need some entertainment in there to break up all of the systemic oppression that I listen to.
Yes. Yes. And I'll say too, I want to point out like the switch of the audiobooks. You have pointed that out, and I have a lot of books at home. I buy physical copies and then still buy the audio version for different times.
Yeah.
I read well while I'm walking. So if I'm taking a walk, I'll take a book. But sitting still with a book doesn't work the same. So having the audiobook playing, and I've been doing that for over a decade now. I remember having to find stuff and download them and then put them on CDs and have to use like 6 or 7 CDs to get all the audio spread out across. Them joints is only holding like 800 megabytes or something.
You got the Game of Thrones on 100 CDs.
But that's always been a bag, and I think there's a especially if whoever's narrating the book has a voice that makes it easy to listen to. It gives you an experience, and I'm all for it. Plus, I don't sit still.
No clue how.
So one of the reasons I asked that, because again, while we're talking about creating, producing content, I think for a lot of people, especially young people watching this, it's important to, understand that a lot of creators out here are consuming a lot. And we take and pull things like, Morgan, you're talking about, true crime and like just messy stuff. Like, I think part of the reason why like a show like the Unrefined Sophisticates work so well is just because you're talking about a lot of serious things, but you're able to pull in that tone where there is a sense of fun and like a sense of messiness with a lot of this stuff. that really does like engage people. And like, I think I've heard you all describe it on the show once. It's kind of like, it's more like bringing people into like a conversation with you all, as opposed to, just reciting the news to you. So I do think that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about like professional development, metrics for success a little bit later. But I just want to, again, for the young people watching, a little piece of information: always be a student, be a lifelong learner. So you talked about the first part of the Unrefined Sophisticates plays on the numbers, but that also gets to the point of, to make this content, you gotta like make it sustainable. You gotta find other ways, not just, the radio is an ever-changing industry, but you're on the podcast networks. You recently announced that you're going to be moving some of the show to Patreon, and which for those who don't know means, yes, some of it is behind a paywall, but again, it's a way to support creators. I myself am on Patreon, so, support creators. Again, just a little pitch for people. But yeah, can you just talk a little bit about why was the time now? Because the show's been going for 5 years, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
So what was the incentive behind moving it to Patreon now?
Can I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A couple of things. One, this show started because Can is a genius and he always has all these great ideas. And this one in particular actually really worked and at least was life-changing for me. And I'm super lucky to have been asked to be a part of this show. I think in the beginning, it was fun. It was like, not that it's not fun now, but in the beginning, it was like fun and, something that we did on Fridays. And it wasn't necessarily from the jump something that we were like, let's make money off of this and let's make this we just all paid for the things together and, got equipment and did the stuff. And as we have continued to evolve and develop, we're more invested in it, and being more invested in it, having listeners that are invested in us. And really, like, it's taken me a very long time to understand that people listen to this show and like it. And, like, people say it, but understanding it and really grappling with that are two different things. And I think that I understand it better now. And I think it's important that in order for it to be sustainable, in order for this to be something that we can continue to invest in, we need a little bit of monetary investment. So I feel like I've definitely been a person who's like, this kind of stuff you shouldn't have to pay for that, you know? But if you don't want a bunch of ads and you don't want us to be out here like slinging things that we aren't, you know, maybe fully morally behind or something, which that's something we don't want to do either, you know? So we feel at this point, in order to continue to evolve the show, we need to have a bigger investment monetarily. And so we're going to continue to do some of the show for free and continue to have that on as many outlets that people can access it as possible. And then part of the show is going to be behind a paywall, and we hope to see you there.
And then I'll add into that also for people who may not be familiar kind of with the structure of the show. With the Unrefined Sophisticates, that top hour is set as the sophisticated portion. So there's, you know, we keep it radio friendly. And then we kick off the second half with taking some shots and then jumping into having the conversations the way we would in person. Not even would,
Yes.
that we do in person. And that can go all kind of places and ways. And one of the original ideas behind that was with our guests. We're trying to get the full scope of people. We get professionals on from the Black community that, you know, have some type of a presence. We've been bringing people on, do the interview, and then let's take a few shots and start asking some of these questions and see their thoughts on some of the more messy things, which gets interesting. And again, it's just trying to show the full scope of people.
Yeah, you really get to understand. It's the humanizing portion. Like we kind of get caught up in titles and what people do for a living, and we all have our own ideas about what it means to be a professional in a certain setting, and forget that those professionals are people. Those professionals have opinions about things, and you learn so much about people when you're able to just chat with them and they're not being the professional, the title that they, you know, have worked so hard to be.
Right.
So I'm just curious, like when you're shooting an episode, what does that look like then? Like, is it, you know, you just hop on and go? You have like a pre-production meeting?
So sometimes pre-production happens during recording. No,
Yeah, so just sometimes.
But now we definitely got a doc. Shout out to Morgan for keeping that doc going. We use that to kind of dump in different topics that we want to touch on. Kind of has our format, along with when we have guests on the show, being able to point them into the direction of the flow. And it's not too much, like we don't meet like an hour before recording, and unless there's something that pops up that it's like, okay, we got to actually go back and forth about this thing. But I think that also takes it into a part of the element of the show is it's our actual responses and reactions to these things. So I know some pods, they have talks before and they go over the topics with each other. So they've already kind of got each other's opinion and stance. That's cool. But I also like in the moment making her want to quit the show. So
yeah, I would like to know the stance beforehand, and I don't. I never know what's happening.
That's how the greatness of it.
Yeah, that is definitely a spark of the show. But yeah, we used to record in person, and then COVID. So recording in person was definitely way different. And in this, you know, change of the way that we do the world right now, like creating backgrounds and having a little area in your, you know, space that you have made for this is fun for me. Like I love that. I love that I get to do this from my house. I can, at whatever point this is over, we can do it in person again, you know, like, so it looks like a Zoom call right now, but it's us having a conversation, and the only difference of it being not just a spontaneous conversation is I've picked out some topics that we'll cover. Otherwise, it's just us chatting. That's not
And then
too
of course
You're
too,
not going through the.
I was gonna say going through the
Go ahead.
time too of figuring out like because the behind the scenes, right? Like getting the right microphone set up, figuring the right audio interface, understanding how to even mix the files after they're coming through. So that's always been a thing of like bringing in old knowledge of audio engineering and being able to apply that to this setting. So I think we were able to get pretty good audio. So I think that's another piece that's to it. Of course, we're in a space what the pandemic has done, and I love this, is that it's kind of brought that entry point barrier down where people are more forgiving for audio that's just going through, your computer speaker, and they're not going crazy. That used to stand out hella. Video, everybody's not working with the same type of webcam, so people are just more forgiving. So it's allowed a lot more people to create content without being self-conscious or worried about how people are going to respond to their level of gear, and I love that for them.
And he says for them because we have the best.
Yes.
Oh man, I feel that though, just because I think part of my own journey, kind of getting into this audio visual space, especially in like the last couple of years, it was just okay, we're just over the Zoom, we're on the Zoom call, just recording it, with the audio, with the integrated webcam, and you can get in there, you can be, get a show on air, but then you kind of have that internal push to be like, okay, I gotta step this up. I've tuned in. I saw how, as old host of mine said, oh, it sounds like we're underwater on here. And then you have that, that personal push. You want to get that new mic. You want to kind of like set up a background that actually works. You want to get, the ring light and all these things. So it ends up kind of like, one, building you up you end up like learning this stuff on your own accord anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But also, when you talk about just like the investment into these products, which is kind of what I was getting to with the Patreon question, because I think one of the things that was cool about, connecting with Ambush and the Numberz was like, yeah, creators, if you're creating content for us, you own your IPs, you own your content. It's not something that is, and maybe you can speak to this, running the talk content portion of like why that's so important and why that's so significant, especially for Black creators in the city.
Mm-hmm. For us, it's basically just, we're the amplification. That's what it is. There are a lot of voices that need to be heard, a lot of perspectives that need to be heard. And sometimes people don't know how to take it from them recording to another place. You can put it on, SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, go down the list. But it still needs to get to people's ears. And yeah, you can be found, but at this point, if we've seen in this last 5 years, podcasting went from, little podcast stuff to like, this is a business that people are starting to take serious, and companies are investing in podcast platforms and networks and so on. Yeah. So the bigger thing is just to amplify. And as we've managed to start growing as fast as we have at the station, we want to be able to give that opportunity. And that's the way that I see it when I'm dealing with people who have ideas for shows. We're kind of finally got things dialed where we have all the topics we kind of want to have covered for the moment as we're building it out. But it's just this idea that we don't want nothing necessarily from, there's no fees involved. There's not this piece of, well, you put it through our channels, then you owe us, or we have some type of ownership. Like, nah, you're doing the work, and we understand what it is to do the work because this is what we're doing continuously. And so there's a lot of times that I think people can forget of how hard it was in the process of learning and creating something. Once they've kind of got the ball rolling and they're going, and like, we're never too far away from that. I think that as creatives, we're constantly creating, and to get out of touch with that and to not give somebody the alley-oop doesn't make sense, at least in my mind. And I think the people in the circle of the realm of the Numberz, family and friends.
One of the things that I think is super dope about the Numbers is they invested in equipment that they can lend out to folks that are looking to create content and don't have the ability to do it. You know, like Can said, okay, so maybe you can produce your own show, but there's a lot of people that don't even know what that takes and what that means and what the equipment is, and don't have the ability to just, you know, drop a couple $100 on new stuff to see if they like to do this thing.
Yeah.
So the fact that there are like audio kits that, you know, they invested in early that allowed people to learn how to use that equipment, learn how to be out on the street and have a conversation with people. Bruce, like you said, always be a student. These are the kind of things when you start to pick something up, like you don't just get to show up and host the show. You know, there isn't, you have to know a lot of stuff that goes into not just the audio, not just the video if you're going to do video, but producing the show, what people are listening to, what they're looking for, all of those kind of things. And so it's a constant journey of education, I guess is what I'm saying. You're continuously picking new things up. And in that, you're learning how to use equipment that maybe you've never even seen before, you know,
Right.
and or didn't know could be so little, or you know what I mean? Like audio interfaces that are the size of your hand, that's wild to me. But that's something that is really easy to learn how to use and create content that then you can immediately take the little flash drive out, put it into your you know, into your computer and work and edit. Like it's just it's really cool to learn all of this new stuff, and every time you pick up something new, there's all of these threads that you have to figure out too. And it's just another piece of learning more every day.
Yeah, you know, I'd be remiss to have this conversation without talking about how the Numbers recently partnered with the Portland Art Museum and now has a studio in the space. And I think one of the things that's, you know, been cool for me with that, just, you know, Ambush connected me with producer, shout out to Ito, who, you know,
Hey.
that young kid, you know, from Idaho, I want to say. But
Yes,
you know, so
Ado
it's kind of
is from
interesting.
Idaho.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. He being from Idaho, me being from Lake Oswego, got that connection of being in very places devoid of Black people.
Right.
But yeah,
I'm just
but I think
getting
one of the things that
myself.
was really nice about the space, in addition to like being able to do the work and, you know, get exposed to like these different pieces of equipment, how stuff works, is just like, you know, I can be in the studio with Ambush and Ito, and we could be working on this upcoming Bruce Poinsett show. Stay tuned, people watching. It's coming soon. But we can be working on the show while also having like an hour and a half conversation on just all the CW like nerd shows and, you know, why the Flash stopped working 7 years ago, but people still watch for some reason. Like, and there's like this interesting like community building aspect of it and like the physical space that I'm not sure if either one of you two want to like talk about that. I think is really important in addition to, you know, the stuff on the paper and the product that you put out to people.
So I think that's a great point, especially with the initial launch of the partnership with the museum. I spent a lot of time up there with Ambush, working into the wee hours, and the amount of times we had conversations of this is really for real. Like, we are in the Portland Art Museum, and we're showing up as us. Like, they're getting the experience, and to be in this space and having content creators come in as we were building things out, being in that space felt like hanging at Auntie's house with all the cousins. It was and still is that energy, and then it's dope in terms of the people who are kind of the nucleus at the center in building these blocks together. Really different individuals.
Mhm.
Like, wildly intersecting in a way that is the perfect balance, and it's welcoming. And I think that's something that people feel in general coming through. It legit feels like you're walking into a place you've been before, and that's because we're there. These are the faces, the art, the way things are laid out and arranged, the music playing. It's all stuff we're familiar with, so we're not having to work up to get comfortable. We come in with the comfort laid out. And then the conversations, being able to engage in these conversations, everything isn't always business because nobody lives in that space. That gets burnt out. I want to know about you. And so people coming in, some of the conversations that I've walked in on, and I'm sure others can, attest to walking in on some wild conversations about, something as random as Flash, or we're in here talking about what you don't put on Philly cheesesteaks in terms of condiments, and really spending time on this. It helps all the way through. And for the younger content creators and people new to it who are not familiar coming into the space that might be intimidated at the thought of it, especially kind of with our layout now, having to come through the art museum, coming into the space that we've got, there's the vocal booths, all this gear, everything going on in there, that can be intimidating to somebody. And we understand that. So I think there's a subconscious part of us that comes into play where it's wanting to make sure that your experience here is something unique and that you're able to take whatever you get for the time that you're dealing with the numbers and take that on with you into the world. And that's, I feel like, if for the people who are going to stick in the multimedia space, what better way to come in than to be tainted with your entry? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's something I take very seriously. Plus, I like laughing.
Just real quick to add, like the community feel, the feels like home, like what Can is saying is so important and so real. Like being able to walk into the Portland Art Museum as not a consumer of that art, in the moment. It's just this, I get to walk in here and go directly to an office space that I get to work out of that doesn't look like an office space, that is, like Can said, there's vocal booths, there's merch, there's, DJ setup, there's all sorts of stuff. And the idea around having that kind of space is so that people can come through and work and create and not be stifled in any way by outside environmental things, and being in community with people that mean it, that are not just doing something that they're passionate about, but are also passionate about helping you do something you're passionate about. Right. That's just an artist community that I'm not going to say didn't exist before, but that I didn't have access to, and so this feels like we're supporting each other in ways that we wouldn't have had the ability to. And that goes to actually, somebody answering questions for you and giving you advice on something, and all the way to having those cultural conversations of like why you don't put certain things on a Philly cheesesteak. We learn a lot. That's all diaspora too, right? Yeah. And regionally, cultural, and all of that stuff. Like there can't be a monolith, and we get to live in that all the time. It's really great.
And let me also throw in that we also have a whole gallery on the 4th floor for anyone that wants to take a stroll through the Oxmute Gallery, brought to you by the Numberz in partnership with Portland Art Museum.
Yes.
Happen to be in the area, check it out.
All right. So, yeah, a few more questions before we go to the audience Q&A, but I just want to remind all the participants here, if you have questions, please throw them in the chat, whether it's for Morgan, Can, or myself, or all of us, and we will be doing audience Q&A shortly. So getting back to both on a station level, but then also on like a show level, what do you consider your metrics for success? I know, Morgan, you said earlier, you're still kind of like getting used to this idea that people are listening to the show. So, how do you measure how things are going well? And also to that end, what role does marketing play and what challenges do you face in getting the word out?
So I am the person that actually looks at the stats every week because that's just part of putting our document together. So to be clear for anybody paying attention, when I say I'm still wrapping my mind around people listening, like I see the numbers, I see them go up, I see them get bigger. It's still just kind of like, what? uh, like these are repeat people. This isn't a bot. Like what? What? So that's what I mean. I see it. Um, we have not put ourselves in a position of being like we're gonna have, this. What we want to have is 10,000 listens to this one episode, and stuff like that yet. Um, so our metrics, at least for me, are a little bit different, and has more to do with how we feel about the show and how we feel about the growth of it and continuing it. And by that, I mean, um, we will never have a great product or put out anything if he and I don't have a great relationship still, right? And so we talk to each other all the time. We are a part of each other's lives. Um, and that is that's a metric to me. Like our relationship is the show. And um, knowing numbers and like we'll start to be making money from this, that's going to be cool, and that will be we will be able to say what metrics those are successful. But right now it really for me is getting text messages or Instagram DMs of people being like, yo, I never knew this thing, um, can't explain this thing a way I would have never understood it otherwise, or whatever. There's lots of examples of people actually listening to and learning from the show, and we're not claiming to be educators in any way. It's nope, not me. But what I am claiming to be is someone who knows how to distill information and give it in a way that is a little more palatable. And so to hear that feedback, that is what we're doing in a way that isn't calculated, is success to me.
And to that also, being that we've done it for the 5 years and kind of coming into it, there was not so much a plan. This was more so the stuff we talk about needs to be heard. That was more what it was. Like, let's record some of these conversations and get going. And so there wasn't that type of focus to begin with. And once we got to the point, I think, where we've got it dialed in, which was right around, we kind of did a reformat, because there was times where we were doing 3-hour shows. We've jumped down to 90. I think we kind of stay in the 90 to 2 hours, 90 minutes to 2 hour space. But we've done a lot, but we finally gotten it dialed. And now at this point of being able to have it dialed, we know that we can pay attention more to some of the metrics. That's what going into the idea of Patreon and so on, paying attention to these actual numbers of how to grow the brand, how to really put that. And I think the pandemic gave us enough time also to sit with that and realize there's some of the angles in which we can take. You talked about marketing and like thinking of how that plays into it. We know that the organic reach in general is like non-existent. I think TikTok was the last, thing that came out that big company didn't jump into. Now they're there. So it's, back to some of the pay for play type situations. We're understanding more and more, of course, the importance of that. And in order to do that, we're going to have to put money behind it, which goes back to the funding. What I'll tell anyone, there's the way, depends on how people's relationship with social media is, because we have to remember too, there's a lot of podcasts that we listen to. There's, some of the things I named earlier. These are companies behind these people, or they've got a team that are built out to do a lot of this stuff. And, the juggle of day to day can make marketing hard. That's, I can honestly say, like on our end of, the day-to-day, work, full-time jobs and life, kids, all the things, play a part in there. So we're a two-person.
Mm-hmm.
See how I did that?
Yeah.
I ran it back. Two-person show. and just now getting to the point of having other resources coming in to be able to help push the marketing aspect. Because again, with all of you can create all the content in the world. If nobody is able to see it, then does it matter? It does matter because you're creating. But if you're trying to make some sustainable money from it, then yeah, you got to do more.
Yeah, I really love that point you made about keeping, especially because we're always told, look at some of these examples or look at, at least aspirationally, like, I want to be like this creator. I want to be in this space, but also keeping in perspective, in a lot of cases, these are, this is a whole machine working behind this. Or even with people who have done it more independently, this is a brand that's been building up for years, if not decades. I was listening to, it's a weird place to bring up Joe Rogan in this conversation, but I was talking about it was like 11 million, listeners per episode or something for the podcast, and just how ridiculous that is. But it's like, I'm thinking about, I remember when Joe Rogan and Doug Stanhope took over the Man Show like 20 years ago or something. Like that's, and then, Fear Fact, like that's a brand that's been building up to the point where it's like, he is able to do 4-hour shows with weird racists and just, I don't know when people are going to see this video outside of this live, so timing may be off, but we just had a whole thing about how he doesn't understand how Black skin works. So that happened this week. Anyways, the point being is that like these brands, it's not usually like, it's not just a matter of like following up trends and that's how they like, that's part of it, but there has to be something more. So when you talk about that sense of, that sense of purpose, making sure like the relationship is still good, still strong, and that's really what people are coming for, and understanding that. I think that's really important for people to hear. I say that selfishly, like, because I'm listening to a number of like, some of my favorite shows, some of my favorite creators right now who I'm looking at and saying, I see this is the moment where they're going off of the cliff because they're having open conversations on the show of like, hey, we're changing the format because someone told us we need to get these numbers on this to do this. I'm like, ooh, I know how this movie ends. Yeah. It was a good run.
It's called Rory and Mal.
We're naming.
I mean, that was just, we all saw that coming. If you were even peripherally paying attention, we saw that coming. Yeah.
Yes. So with that, I want to open it up. I think we have a few, we have tons and tons of audience questions just pouring in. So let's see if I can tap in here. See if there's anything else. Okay. So yes, from Laura, and it's a question for all of us. If you had all the resources needed, what would the Black media ecosystem in our region look like?
All of the resources needed. I'll just say that I think that it would look a lot like audio, video, print, a lot more community, like activist content that would be able to be in all of those mediums. I think that we would be able to have such a bigger reach and be able to spend the money to do the advertising, to, like all of the things that we're unable to actually pour lots of dollars into. And we would be able to teach people how to do all of these things in a way that is way more empowering. And I'm not a big fan of that word anymore, but way more empowering in the way of You know, sports get a lot of funding for Black kids. It's just legit like the only thing people think of that Black people will be interested in, I guess. I don't know. But had I had access to learning how to do any of this stuff, I would have had a far different life, you know? Like my confidence level would have been completely different with talking in front of people. I spent most of my life till right now being completely petrified by the idea of public speaking, and grew up with a dad who did that for a living. And I was always in awe of like, how could you do this? I'm scared for you. And now I'm, you know, an adult who's able to do this and wants to do this and is excited to do it every single week. That's a game changer, you know? Like I thought that maybe if anybody was going to listen to something I ever had to say, I would write it down and maybe somebody would read it, you know? And this has completely changed my life. So like to be able to give that to other people would be a huge focus if we had the funding that we deserve, honestly. Because there's a lot of kids that would much rather be either behind the scenes and doesn't want to be someone on the Zoom, but wants to be the best audio engineer in the game. Somebody who is the best videographer. Like learning all of this equipment changes your whole idea on what you can and can't do, you know, and what possibilities there are for being paid as doing something that you want to do instead of getting a job that you hate. And I think that would be one of the best parts of being able to be funded in the way that we should be.
Sorry, that was weird. In addition to that, the youth part, like that's a big focus. And even with some of the kids we've had come intern with us, that's a focus. We did a multimedia camp this past summer. Got a group of kids in, hit all the facets of audio, video, did drawing, and what we ended up doing was having each of them do a final project and present on, you know, why they chose that, let them kind of explore. We kind of left it open-ended and just had kind of the mediums that they wanted to figure out, made that happen, and then sent them off back into the world with a multimedia kit with some digital cameras that was it movie anyways, cool little digital cameras on
the gimbal thing,
gimbal camera, along with a recording setup. So if you guys want to do anything, here you go. If you don't, it is what it is. You still got it. And that was huge because it created access. And it wasn't cheap gear. This was nice stuff. And it's those things that being introduced to people while they're still young sets them up for not just wondering or feeling like that's not something for them. And it goes back to Morg's point about like sports being shoved down the throat. I've been taught my whole life. It's always been sport. Nobody talked about my straight A's through all of school. That was never a pat on the back. Not important. Just, are you hooping? Can you dunk this ball? That was all that was, you know, really what I would get. And so like being in the space to be able to show these other ways. And then also there's an element to our understanding that entertainment isn't just in front of the camera. It's not just on the microphone. Going back to Morg's point again, there are so many other things and roles that happen in the space of multimedia. And if you don't know, you don't know. Just like it's a ton of people who just think in the world of working in a company organization, there's just a manager, a supervisor, and so, like, no, there are a lot of places that you can go within any org, and being able to expose people to that, I feel like helps set things up better for the futures.
And what you said about, especially about the emphasis on sports, like I graduated from high school in 2007, right? I didn't play basketball my senior year, but I still have shoes just from all the Nike hookups we got that are still good on the court today because that's the kind of resources they would put into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one resonates with me. But when you talk about especially youth development opportunities, youth exposure opportunities, that's something I'm really passionate about, something I hope to, just echo what you all are saying, is creating more of those. There's so many examples, but I interviewed this artist, Carmen Rivera, for another show that I actually have on the Numbers, the Black Task Adventure, every Wednesdays at 7. Again, I'm not above a plug here, but yeah. And she was talking about how in college, I guess there was someone, just had this studio space that, they'd let, just young people come in, mess around with, make songs, just kind of, but having that space where people could feel comfortable and kind of get used to the equipment. Well, she just talks about being huge in her development. And there's a bunch of other stories like that. But also even having people, I think the more obvious example, everyone might think, hey, like PPS throughout Portland Public Schools, because having people come in, but even, I think about growing up in a place like Lake Oswego, like have Black media creators of all different, whether it's, a comic book artist, whether it's a podcaster, whether it's someone like an Ambush, have them come into like those schools too. There was a story, like they still have cops coming in doing weird drug programs. There was a story out of Bend like a few months ago where they tried to do some like, what was it? One of the like drug sniffing dog like demos, and they left the heroin there. True story.
What?
I kid you not. I was about to say something else, but I kid you not. Like they found it. They found a baggie of heroin there from the demo like a month later. People look this up. I kid you not. That's what we're doing with the time. We could have anything else, but that's what we're doing with the time. I'm just saying. Anyways, that's a diversion for another thing.
Yeah.
So we have some more questions, kind of to a similar lane. Like, what else would you like to see happening in town? What are some things you would hope to, or what are some things you would hope to inspire that would inspire you?
That this can be achieved, and it's a process. I hope people understand that they can show up as their full self, but also to show up as your full self, you need to know who your full self is, and understand that people are a lot more comfortable with you being exactly who you are, and I think that's what, again, the platform like the Numbers is allowing people to do. They're able to get these different takes from the Blacks, a lot of Black content creators. Sorry, I'm going into unrefined mode. But it's this type of, with this platform in this city where we have the ability to kind of shift the narrative right now, because we're able to actually tell the stories of our experiences. And also it's not always like from this oppressed state. Like we used to say, the oppression Olympics. It's not about that.
We're not playing that.
There's also like the Black futures. I love that term. Like talking about things that are going on, having content that is centered around joy, enjoyment of life, coming together, not just always conflict. I hope to see that there are more groups that are able to come together, and as the Numbers, builds and continues to build, that we're able to pull more people in and being able to collaborate with more organizations, and then just individuals out here doing things. And this turn into something that when people ask that question, like, are there Black people in Portland? Mm-hmm. When they show up, we're one of the places that they can point people to, and then they can feel like there's a piece of them that is here, and filling that home wherever that home may actually be. I don't know if I answered the question, but I felt it sounded good.
That worked for me.
Full self. Yeah, I kind of got off track there at the last part.
I'm not going to pretend like I remember the question.
What else would you like happening in the town?
You answered it. We can move forward.
So that was from Solomon. Solomon also asked if you would come on his IG Live one day, and I see in the chat that Ken, you're already trying to set that up. So,
Yeah, set it up.
you know, we're making connections as we do
Hi,
this
Solomon.
call.
I didn't realize Solomon was on here. There's some
Yes,
black
yes.
media for you right there.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we got a thing from Andrew. Sounds like funding and training are key component to envision a thriving Black media ecosystem. What else comes to mind to build Black media infrastructure?
Training is one thing. Education, I think, is the most important. So, like we talked about, not just having, like a producer who produces your show, but researchers. So we were talking about, Joe Rogan has a huge team. Joe Budden has a huge team. Drink Champs, all of these highly monetized and infused shows have 40, 50 people that they employ. And so their weekly shows, their daily shows, bi-weekly shows that's kind of the getting closer to the I get to show up and just host, because you have so many people that are creating the show for you. And part of that, I think, especially for Black-led media, is being able to contextualize the news, to contextualize the stories that are happening. Because like Can said, it's not about like playing the oppression Olympics or saying how hard we have it. The point is to say why it's so hard that we have it, so that you don't take on this personal, individual, responsibility, the things that you shouldn't. And so sometimes we need to remember that all of this bad news in the news today has happened before, has continued to happen. And the reason why it gets to continue to happen is because there are moneyed interests to make it make it so. And so we need to be able to counteract that. And in order to do that, you have to have people that know how to contextualize the information that we're trying to, disseminate. That's the right word. So that's part of it too. We need to be able to teach actual, American history to students. But if they're not going to get it in school, they need to be able to get it somewhere else so that they can actually live in this world and make more sense of it, instead of acting or taking it on as their own sort of failures. And that takes a lot of money too.
She said it all.
Okay. I think that brings up just another point. We talk about the needs today because, and it's a whole other discussion, like a whole other panel to talk about, combating misinformation today. But to your point, Morgan, like contextualizing, like also bringing in new ideas and having these conversations, but just providing context to misinformation is an ever apparent need, especially right now. So like, there's no shortage of, opportunities, needs, again, and not just like someone behind the camera, behind the mic, but, in all aspects of the production of it to, again, cut through. Like something I was thinking about, we talked about marketing earlier. I've seen a lot of efforts, especially like billboard campaigns, but usually it's with like something that's very clearly like a nonprofit, or it's, there was one not very long ago around Black on Black violence that was very questionable. I'll just
questionable. You're using nice words today.
But when I think about building, again, just getting the word out and cutting through, especially like Black terms, Black enterprise, spaces, whether it be radio or whatever you want to put it, like, what would it mean if we had a similar billboard campaign around Black radio or independent Black media, just around the city, or even if you want to get really expansive, like driving down I-5, we're going to Salem, then going to Corvallis, going to Eugene, going into Southern Oregon, but you're still seeing like, hey, here's the Black media you can listen to, especially as you go into some of these spaces where, you know, it just the atmosphere might be very
It's tricky.
lonely. Yeah. You know, what happens when we invest in stuff like that? I don't know if that's something we can do out here, but I just think, or even we use the Supreme Court example because Justice Stephen Breyer this week announced that he'd be retiring, and part of that campaign was a group buying a van and putting Breyer retire on it and driving all around California. Like, what happens when we start like investing in some of these not new marketing because billboards are old, but just like more ambitious efforts to get the word out and cut through the noise?
Guerrilla style marketing, I think, is what they coined that term. That matters. Why? Because like when things are shocking or catch you off guard, they stick in your memory. Right? The amount of drives I do home from the office that I don't recall, unless there's something wild that happens, it's mundane. So I think there's a lot to that. And being able to have the awareness, because that's something that we definitely deal with the station, especially for how much has happened in this past year with the station, last year and a half. It's the expansion has been crazy, but it's still one of those things that people are needing to get familiar with. It's more so of the branding. They know the logo. They know, they've seen some shirts or merch around, but as far as tuning in and knowing that, oh, this is actually a station. They play music, they do playlists, there's talk content on there. That familiarity is just now starting to happen in the way that we would like. So there's definitely a lot more. And of course, being a nonprofit setup, that plays into, how some of this funding, now that we have the status, there's a lot more things that I think will be going along the route of the guerrilla marketing and trying the tactics that have not been used. I like the idea. We've talked billboard before, even the idea of some of the bus joints, because those make it all the way around the city. I think we've done a pretty decent job with the merch that's actual like wearable, cool styling apparel. So I feel like that's a marker. But then again, it's just having to figure out some of those things that we haven't done up to this point, the non-traditional routes, and we're going to.
Yeah, and I think, Morgan, you're talking about, urban radio from back in the day. And I think like I was a kid when like the 95.5 street team was a thing. But like at the same time, if I was a kid in Lake Oswego who knew about that, that means something.
Right.
Like when you talk about this idea of like guerrilla marketing. So yeah, it'd be interesting.
I mean, yeah, they had a whole street team. They had multiple vehicles. They had multiple groups of people that went out and were like, you're going to know exactly who we are. And they were at, every event and throwing events. Sorry, I didn't mean to start yelling there. But that's a thing that takes money, like you got to have an investment in order to pay people. And I'm a person who I'm all for community. I am absolutely down to volunteer a lot of time, but I do not like to see Black and brown people not get paid. And so we need to be able to pay these people to do those things in order to be truly investing in the community and their future, in my opinion. Like we can teach you a whole bunch of stuff, but you deserve to be paid for your time, So that's, more money equals all of that. We want to be able to continue to not just get, provide the foundation for people to possibly change the trajectory of their life, but we want them to be able to afford to live too. And an important piece of being a Black-led radio station is to get people that are new to any of these structures, new to any of these industries, any of this ways of creating, to learn how to value what they bring to the table at a much earlier age than some of us were afforded, And I want those people to know what it's like to have the kind of financial backing to have a good show in the art gallery, to have events that truly highlight artists and what they're doing. And that is one of the big passions of the station, to make sure that people are able to know how they should be treated in these industries, and they get it from people that look like them. That's like super important.
So first, I just want to say we're definitely clipping that portion, and also thank you for yelling for that portion, because you know, just in making these clips, I gotta know how the sausage is made. But we have another question from Solomon. I know we're way over time here, so this is going to be the last question. Thank you all for everyone else who's kept the chat going. And Solomon writes, along those lines, how do you see your work as a way to reach all Black Portland, in particular the transplants who don't find community here because it's so different from what they've come from? To Morgan's earlier point of how much different Black radio is so different in places where there's more of us. So yeah.
I would say that kind of hits on, kind of being that the people at the Numbers are a blend of Portlanders and non-Portlanders. And this city is, in my experience, as a person that didn't grow up here, a lot of the people I run into are from somewhere else. And so usually one of the first things I do in conversation is say, can you submit a playlist? And then point them towards submitting a playlist from what it is that they rock with, let them know about what we've got going on at the station, and trying to connect in that way. As like a baseline, right? And then from there, because you have all these different perspectives that are coming together as far as the Black experience, and being able to be an outlet to not just point people in the direction of where to go, what to do this weekend, events that are happening. Even as, as much traffic as we've brought to the museum, people that never would have stepped inside if it wasn't for us doing what we're doing there. That stuff is important. And I think there's always going to be something when people move out of state to another place of that nothing is going to be home. So you got to get that out of the head. Also know kind of what you're coming into. I get a lot of people come here for work, and it seems more times than not, people came here for work or just ended up here, which is an interesting place just to end up. Especially from some of the places that they're coming. There's a lot of people coming from the East Coast. I run into a lot of Philadelphia is happening right now too.
Yeah, a lot. A lot.
So seeing that, what's coming here, there's the element that we're never going to be able to provide what you had at home. That's just not there. But what we can do is talk about the ways to incorporate things from your home. Talk to us about those things. Let's see how it is that we can add that into the mix, or an element of that, to keep building out what's already rolling along. You know what I mean? It's basically Pimp My Ride radio version.
Can I just add something?
Go ahead and clip that.
Just to add to what Ken is saying, one of the things that the Numbers also did was create a bodega inside of the Oxmute Gallery. So, in Portland, corner stores are corner stores. We don't call them bodegas. We don't call them poppy stores, but that is exactly what they are on the East Coast. And there is now, a bodega style store that features all Black artists living in Portland. Like, that is huge. And it's inside the Portland Art Museum, which, like Can said, there's a lot of people who that wasn't a destination that they were going to choose to go, spend any of their time. And part of that is how high art can be exclusionary. And this, shout out to the Portland Art Museum for definitely not just creating space, but being very genuine in what they want to happen with that space. And what they want to happen with that space is for the Numbers to authentically create whatever it is that they want to create. And they are not in the way. They are not gatekeeping. They are literally like, be your Blackest self, if that's what you want to, please do the things you want to do. And coming from here and having worked in fine art for entertainment side of it for a lot of my career, that has not been the experience as a Black person. So to be able to see it and be a part of it and see how it's building out, and like Cam was talking about the expansion of it, like this only happens when you have so many different experiences coming together and so many different lives that have lived all over this country and outside of this country. That's how you get it. You don't get it just by only people that were born and raised in Portland or only in Philadelphia. You know, like it takes that whole culmination.
Nice little quote.
If I'm correct, those candles behind you are part of what's available at the bodega, aren't they?
You are not above a plug for me either. I love it. Yeah, I make those, and they're at the bodega right now. Saint candles that are people living or dead, but they are not the saints that you would normally see, and but they are people that matter hugely to our community and mean a lot to me. This first round of what I made was what I wanted to make. It wasn't necessarily like what I thought would reflect our community, but it did. And things that we love does reflect our community.
Yes, Lord.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you again. We're way over time, so I just have one more question to end this on a positive, inspiring note, which is, who is a local Black media personality that inspires you and why?
Ambush.
Yeah, yikes.
Ambush is legitimately watching what he's done in the bit of time being here, and it being coming from a genuine place, right? There's I always talk about when you speak of someone and everybody is saying the same or similar thing, like that's usually a telltale sign. And his ability to make people feel included, his ability to make people feel valued and that their ideas matter consistently, not just for when it's convenient, consistently. His ability to connect the dots in terms of, oh, you're telling me about this idea? I know 2 people right now that you should definitely have a conversation with. I'm going to help set that up. Does that without even thinking about it. One of the most patient, hardworking people come across. Up until meeting Ambush, I thought I did the most things in a day. I don't understand how he does the things in a day, but he does it. And
it's me.
Yeah, there you go. That's the charge. The battery in his back is his boo. But that's a straight up. That's and even though not being a Portland, somebody that grew up here in Portland, as far as that goes, he's a pillar to me. And then there's other people I've gotten inspiration from over the years in terms of just seeing the work that they've done, whether it was in the videography field or stand up. Like there's so much stuff and there's so many cool people, but as far as building out and seeing this thing be built out and watching it happen in real time, I'm constantly in awe. And I'd be learning.
So I would have said Ambush too, but since you did, I'm gonna shout out Mac Smith. We Out Here magazine has I've seen the evolution of what Mac has done, and there's print, there's live entertainment shows, and it's gone from really being musically focused to I'm not going to say heavily political, but political and things that matter to our community. And he is involved in the community and is also able to, get the sound bites on CNN or whatever, because he's able to, he's down there talking to the mayor and will, tell him exactly what he needs, what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, right to their face. So, yeah, shout out Mac Smith.
Yes. Mac for governor.
Yeah, in the chat.
You don't want that
Mac
job.
for governor.
You don't want that job. You know you don't want that job.
Yeah, Morgan, Ken, thank you so much again for taking the time to talk with me, to answer questions from the chat, and just share your knowledge with people. I think, again, it's important for us to be able to have these conversations, and I want to, obviously, as I said, I've got a couple shows on the Numbers I've shamelessly plugged already, but just in general, I do think it's important for us to get out the word about all the stuff we're doing out here and all the stuff Black creators are doing out here, because we're in Oregon. They literally they made 3 laws that banned us from living here in the 1800s. Rapid gentrification is still happening right now. It's there's a lot working against us. Freeway expansion, I-5.
I-5, what? Huh?
Tubman School. What?
Tubman, what?
What? Speaking of which, that's a great segue as we get people to put on we don't have a date yet, but look in March for part 3 of Black News Future, which will be on the interface between local politics and media. And we just might be talking about the I-5 expansion. We just might be talking about the Rose Quarter project. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, this video will be going up online sometime soon. And if you want to, actually Morgan can, before I plug my own stuff, where can they find you? They're looking to find out more of what you all are doing.
You can find us on the Instagrams at Unrefined Sophisticates. You can follow me on the Instagrams at I Technically Can. And you can find Morg at Portland Morgan on the Instagrams. Then, I'll pass it over. I was about to.
I thought you were gonna do the whole thing. Make sure you like us, subscribe. You can find our show everywhere. It's all of our things are available on all outlets, as well as the Numbers.
Yeah. So if you want to find me, Bruce Poinsett, brucepoinsett.com, youtube.com/Bruce Poinsett, where so many of these videos and these interviews live. And then if you want to materially, support the art, the projects, patreon.com/Bruce Poinsett. And thank you all again. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. And Black News Future Part 3 coming out soon.
Thank you, Bruce. Super happy to be here.
Hey.
Thank you.